Here is John Lennon, and a little bit later on in the program we'll talk about the possibility of his having to leave the United States, and at that time his attorney, Mr. Leon Wilds, will join us to make certain that John or I make no mistakes in the legalities. But I welcome you here, and I'm glad that you're here. As I said at the outset, back in 1964, after the cataclysmic arrival of the Beatles here in the United States and the great popularity you had on the Ed Sullivan program and others, there were many people who did not really understand what you were doing, and they thought then that your hair was long and that you looked modish, you know, and you were revolutionary. Does it surprise you at all that it took so many of us such a long time to get into your act and to realize what you were doing?
No, it was mainly parents, and they were against rock and roll, you know. Anyway, before the Beatles came along, I mean, people have been trying to stamp out rock and roll since it started.
Why do you think that is? What are they afraid of?
I always thought it was because it came from black music, and the words had a lot of double entendre in the early days. And it was sort of, you know, the white kids, our white, nice wasps are going to go crazy with all this moving their bodies. You know, and the music got to your body, and the Beatles just carried it a bit further, made it a little more white even than Elvis did, because we were English, you know. And people couldn't hear it. That's why they didn't understand it.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. You know, one could never understand the words until one sat down with the record album. I went to a couple of your personal appearances, including one in, I think, in Philadelphia in 1965 in an outdoor location.
Oh, yeah.
And there was so much screaming and so much carrying on. And did that bother you at all when you were doing those concerts? That people couldn't hear your music, that all they heard was themselves screaming?
It got a little boring. I mean, it was great when it first happened. When you'd come on, there'd just be nothing but wah, you know. But then we just became like lip-syncing, you know, miming. And sometimes things would break down and nobody'd know. And so it wasn't doing the music any good, you know.
When you guys were in the dressing rooms after these concerts, or when you were in the dressing room after the Ed Sullivan show, where, my heavens, young people were just almost flinging themselves on stage, didn't you ever wonder, are these people crazy? Are we that good? Can we really produce this kind of reaction in people?
We didn't think whether we're that good or not. You've got to think you're good to do what we did, you know. It was like being in the eye of a hurricane, and so there was never a time when you thought, what's going on? And that was about as deep as it got. What is happening? Or what, you know, you'd suddenly wake up in the middle of a concert or a happening and think, what, how did I get here, you know? The last thing I remember was playing music in a club, and the next minute this. But we never thought about it too much, because it was an ongoing thing. It was happening to us, and it was hard to see, you know. We were just in the middle, being ushered from room to room.
As I recall, there were fan clubs or clubs of followers formed for each of the individuals in the organization.
Well, it was mainly a Beatle club, but, you know, they sort of fanned it out a little just to keep the...
And I'm just wondering how unified any group can be. And I'm not singling out the group that you belong to, the Beatles, but how unified can any group be when the audience has certain favorites? Maybe they like Paul more than they like John, or something like that. And I wonder, I got right to it, didn't I? Yeah. I just wondered if it's awfully difficult to be friends, and do you really care about whether or not you're friends when you are a group such as the Beatles, or whether you're the Rolling Stones or whoever?
We didn't break up because we weren't friends. We just broke up out of sheer boredom, you know. And boredom creates tension.
How can you get bored doing what you did?
Because it was going on, it was not going anywhere, you know. We'd stop touring, and we'd just sort of say, time to make an album, you know, go in the studio, and the same four of us would be looking at each other and playing the same licks.
And those silly haircuts,
Those silly haircuts that you have now. You see, notice he's got his now. And we were very good friends, and we'd known each other since we were 15, you know, and we got over all the actual fighting, the real nitty-gritty, dirty, you know, stuff, which had nothing to do with how popular we were. The same popularity, meaning Paul was always more popular than the rest of us, was going down in the dance halls in Liverpool, so it didn't come as any big surprise, you know. I mean, the kids saw him, the girls would go, ooh, ooh, you know, right away. So we knew where the score was there. But it was a group, it was the music that was interesting, that was important, not who was, you know, as long as we were, you know, going forward and going somewhere, it didn't matter.
But all of a sudden there just
Right,
wasn't any further progress. It was the same old over and over again. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, it just got like a marriage that doesn't work or something.
Now, there are some groups that are quite open in their advocacy in the music that they present. They advocate social justice. They call for an end to war. They wish for a time when there might be a change in the drug possession laws. Your music did not do that. There wasn't a great deal of out-and-out editorialization in the songs that the Beatles did. At least I didn't feel it, and I don't think that a lot of parents felt it.
Now, all our messages were subliminal, you know. Meaning we were sending messages out, all right, but...
Yeah, but what kinds of messages?
Just reporting on the state we were in, you know, looking back on it. And we made things like All You Need Is Love, you know, which is,
well, that's pretty
was
wholesome.
our version.
That's a pretty wholesome message, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wholesome. But it was still a change in attitude. We're part of that psychedelic stuff. But which groups you talking about this advocate change?
Well, you know, I really don't know them offhand, except I sat down one evening with David Crosby and we were talking about some songs that have been done by a number of groups, and since I don't have them fixed in my memory, I shouldn't say it was the Rolling Stones or it was this or that or the other thing.
It must have been people doing Dylan songs more likely.
All right.
Yeah. Are we on or what? No.
Yes, we are on, but we're on back there. Did you want to turn around and wave to the people?
I'd just like to know where it's coming from.
All right, you're over here, and I'm over there, and we're over there.
Yeah.
Huh?
Hi.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Nice to be with you.
Yeah, I like the set now. It's got better, you know. I watch the show all the time.
Thank you. But in any event, your message was subliminal. You didn't have any axe to grind with social injustice, or did you?
No, our only axe was we were the first working class singers that stayed working class and pronounced it. Didn't try and change our accents, which in England were looked down upon, probably still are. Like a Bronx accent, it's equivalent to that. You know. The only change was our image, you know, being slightly... What do you want? What do you want?
Get me off the hook.
Yeah, you're right.
A Bronx accent, it could be a Brooklyn accent, it could be...
Oh yeah, Brooklyn was the one I meant,
okay,
actually.
all right, fine. Just get me off the hook.
Because that sounds like Liverpool. They talk like that there, duty, you know? I mean, all the stars in England before... There were a couple of sort of rock and roll stars before us, but any major star in England had to change his voice. They do it in America to get on TV and radio, right? Hi, I'm from nowhere. The one George Carlin does. Well, that goes in England, too.
Do you know that I once took an audition at a station in the southern part of the United States with a young woman who wanted to do the weather forecast on the television station. And for some curious reason, a southern accent at that time was not acceptable even in the southern United States. And so she asked the engineers if they could put the filter on the microphone that took the southern accent out of all of our voices. And of course, there is no such filter.
No.
And you had to be there, and then you would have realized how humorous that was at the time.
Well, I laughed, didn't I?
Yeah, but you laugh because you're a good guy.
No, filter, I understand the business, you know. Recording, filters. Look funny from the side.
Do you think?
Yeah. Go on.
I don't think you look so.
No,
Look to the side
bad,
again.
it's not
No,
bad.
it's not Ben.
You're just not used to seeing yourself sideways, that's what it is.
Were the Beatles before the groupies, or did you have those?
Oh, we had them, yes.
I mean, not did you have them, but were they
didn't
around?
call them...
Well, did you have them? I guess
They
that's
were great, Tom. They were great. They didn't call them groupies then. I forgot what we used to call them. Something like slags, you know.
Slags?
There's some word they had in England for it. And, yeah, I mean, one of the main reasons to get on stage is it's the quickest way of making contact, you know. And, you know, you went to see those movies with Elvis or somebody in it when we were still in Liverpool, and you'd see everybody waiting to see him, right? And I'd be waiting there too. And they'd all scream when he came on the screen, right? So we thought, that's a good job. That's why most musicians are on stage, actually.
Why is that?
To get a little, Tom, to get a little extra.
What, a little extra money?
Yeah, you know what it is. It is 2 o'clock, right? We're all right.
No, you got to be kidding me. Is that one of the big reasons, the sexual aspects of singing? That's the reason most of these great dedicated
I would say that any
artists are on
performers...
stage, that they don't care about their music, that they're just up there for a little extra?
No, but that is a good incentive. For all performers, let's not just pin down the poor musician.
And it wasn't, well, you speak for yourself, John.
Well, all right. I can't speak for musicians then.
No, and please don't speak for those of us who toil in the television vineyard, because that is the farthest thing from our minds.
Of course.
Yes.
I understand that.
Now, and you say
the news as well.
And then I could assume that when you say that going on the stage to perform music is one of the best ways of making contact, that what you're saying is it's one of the best ways of making sexual contact. Hmm?
Well, yes, we're not looking to have a card game. That's what it is. You know? I mean, you don't go on stage and think, that would make a nice card game.
Most of the young women who follow the rock groups then were very, very young. They were in their teens. And I just wonder if ever there was a problem where an irate father or mother might have called the dressing room on occasion and said, hey, what's going on down there? And you probably said, quiet, there's a card game going on.
Yes, sure. No, I mean, in the very early days when we were playing dance halls, there were just a certain type, which you call groupies now, which would be available for functions at the end of the night. Mm-hmm. And in general, most kids would just go home with their boyfriend or whatever, you know. Mm-hmm. And there was always a small group that just went for any performer. They didn't care whether it was a comedian or a Manuette Glass, you know, as if it was on stage.
Right, the guy who swept up after the elephants. Hey, where are you going?
Right, right. And actually, the people that work for rock groups usually get more action than the actual rock group, right?
I don't say right to me, because I don't know.
Well, you can imagine it, Tom. They auditioned.
Right.
They get the cream of the crop, you know. If you want to see Elvis, you got to see me first.
Gotcha. As you said, right. Let me pause here for these announcements from our affiliated stations. We'll continue with John Lennon in 2 minutes and 5 seconds. You said earlier that it became boring to stay with that group. Why is what you're doing now not boring when that was?
Because I can change musicians whenever I like. And it tends to get into a format, you know, because we were together much longer than the public knew us. You know, it wasn't just from '64. I was 24 in '64, and I've been playing with Paul since I was 15. And he's very nice. and George about a year later or something. So it's a long time we spent together in all the most extraordinary circumstances, from, you know, lousy rooms to great rooms. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just the public just think, oh, you were only together 5 years, we've only got 5 million records, you know. But we were together a long, long time, and we just became stale musically.
But how are you not stale musically now, aside from changing
because
musicians?
I'm interacting with different musicians. To me, they're musicians. They're not just, you know, it's not like, to people, they're all stars, right? It's like having Elton John and Elvis and a few people playing, you know. To me, it isn't. It's just musicians, and to them, it's the same. So if you play with the same person all the time, you get into a rut. Even if you played tennis with the same person.
It's boring.
It comes to a time when you know every move, and you have to find somebody else to play with.
As you listen to music today, I don't know if you listen to the radio a lot or if you listen mostly to records, but what are things that you see that you think are good or bad?
Well, that's pretty general. I like the disco music that's out now, which is great music. I like the thing that happened in Jamaica called reggae. There's a music in Jamaica called reggae, which has been around for years under the disguise of ska, blue beat, etc., but it finally formed itself into reggae. And that's about the really newest thing that's happened in music in the last 5 years or 6 years.
Do you think anything new happens to music, or is it a continual series of cycles, and that maybe 100,000 years ago somebody had the same kind of beat or the same kind of whatever it is that makes it different, and that maybe the whole thing is just going in cycles? Or are we in fact discovering things all the time?
I think there's something to the cycle thing, but I think if you apply the cycle idea to it, that's a cycle for everything, not just music. You know? Mm-hmm. But it's snowballing either just because of electricity or because of all the garbage everybody picks up, you know, because we keep inventing things, right? So it does change, and it has cycles in a way, you know, like I think the whole whatever it is, the universe is a series of cycles. But the music has to change because they keep inventing new things, like, you know, films change, it's now video, so in that way it's different.
But don't you know that in about 1988 there's going to be a group come out that is going to pick right back to the sound that you guys had in the since you're 15 years old, and all kinds of critics and all kinds of writers are going to say, wow, look at this, we've got this whole new sound that's reminiscent of the Beatles back in the 60s?
Well, they'll probably be playing Grutschblobs and Zachtungas, right? You know, they'll have new instruments. And although rock and roll was brand new when it came out and excited everybody, it was sort of, it had roots in blues and jazz. So in that way, they would have their roots in the 60s, 70s, and possibly further back. But you can't say that rock and roll is like the 20s music, although if you look for it, you can find out where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find out where Beatles music came from, or any music came from. It's just like it has its history.
Before we get into your immigration status, and we'll bring Mr. Wilds out at that time.
Hooray!
Hooray! And that is a controversy for you and for
Yeah.
people who would want you to stay in this country. You've been involved in some other mini controversies, like the time that you were on the cover of the album without any clothes on, and like the time
Yes.
that you and Yoko had everybody or invited people to come into the bedroom while you were there.
We held a bed in for peace, yeah.
A bed in for peace, exactly. Why do you do those things? And I don't ask you that because I want to engender some flip response from you, but what does that gain for you as John Lennon, or what does it gain for the cause of peace in the case of the bed in for you to do something like that?
Yoko and I, when we got together, decided that whatever we did was going to be in the papers, you know, whether it's Richard or Liz or so-and-so gets married or whatever people like us do is going to be in the papers. So we decided to utilize the space we would occupy anyway by getting married with a commercial for peace and also a theatrical event. And the theatrical event we came up with, which utilized the least energy with the maximum effect, was to work from bed. And what we virtually had was a 7-day press conference in bed, where the press fought. The first day they fought at the door to get in, thinking there was something, you know, sexy going on. And then they
Licentious.
found, that was the word I was looking for. And they found two people talking about peace, you know. And reporters always have 5 minutes with you, or 10 minutes with you. We let them ask anything for as long as they wanted for 7 days. And all the time we just kept plugging peace. And the story that came out was John and Yoko do bed in for peace. And we were just promoting peace, like you promote any product. You know, they promote war, join the Marines, join this. We were promoting peace. The Naked album cover was less general than that, meaning we didn't have. That was one of the first things we did. We thought, you know, we felt like two virgins. That's what the album was called, because we were in love, just met, and we were trying to make something. And we thought, to show everything. People are always looking at people like me, trying to see some secret, or what do they do? What do they do? You know, do they go to the bathroom? Do they eat?
Do you?
I do, quite a lot. You know, and we just said here, you know, and that was in 1968, and all hell broke loose. But now they're jumping around naked all over the place, right?
Yes, they are, as a matter of fact.
Right. So we were just sort of ahead of our time.
What difficulties are there for people who are in the public eye, who know, as you and Yoko did, that whatever you do, it's going to be picked up in the press, and you really can't go out and, I suppose, have a quiet dinner or go to the park or go to a movie or something like that? What difficulties are there in your life when there's such adulation for you and such curiosity about what you do all the time?
Well, that's cool, because that's part. I reckon that's part of the.
What, part of the
price,
territory?
You know? Yeah, but you see, having gone through the Beatlemania thing, nowadays it's nothing like that. I mean, I can walk down the street and somebody just say, "Oh, hi, John," and they usually say, "How's your immigration?" You know, if it's in New York, right? And they don't hassle me. I might sign one autograph, 2 autographs, you know, and I don't get hassled. And I went through that period where I actually couldn't go anywhere. And so now it's like heaven. I can go and eat. We go and eat. We go to the movies. We go wherever we want. If there's an announcement, like there's an opening and everybody's going to be there, you get a lot of noise and cameras and flashbulbs. But if we just decide to go to dinner, it's cool, you know. We're probably less recognizable than you now, being on every night.
I doubt that.
You're on every night. You kidding?
But it doesn't make any difference, because when you were on, you had 35, 40, 50 million people. I'll never forget the time that you came to Los Angeles. I was working there for Channel 5. and you were giving a concert at, I don't remember where it was. Hollywood Bowl, is that right? Thank you. And there were the lines for the tickets, and there was all the attendant publicity prior to the appearance and everything else. And one of our reporters went out and covered all this, and he came back and he said, it's going to be wild out there tonight. And I, because I'm not very smart, went on the air and I said, well, if you'd like to know where the Beatles are, call this guy, and his home number is. And I mean, his phone didn't stop ringing for 4 days. It was just an obscenity. And I wish that if he's watching, I'm sorry I did that. And so your viewability or your visibility is so tremendously high, or at least was then, and I just wondered if it had kind of slopped over into your career now.
No, I mean, I can get around now, you know. I can get it. I'm glad, too. I don't miss it. I'm glad it happened, but I don't miss it.
Yeah, in spite of the boredom, in spite of the fact that maybe there were little dissensions, those were good times for you.
Oh,
huh?
yeah. I mean, the boredom was in the music. I mean, that came after all the Beatlemania.
Did you save your money?
What we could get our hands on, yeah.
What do you mean, what you could get your hands on?
Well, a lot of it got siphoned off before we even got near it, you know. I mean, we didn't know anything about business or anything like that, you know, and there's a lot of money. There's a lot of millionaires around this world, so, yeah. But that's part of the action, too.
Okay. Let me pause here for these announcements. We'll continue with John Lennon on tomorrow in 2 minutes and 5 seconds, and I trust you'll stay tuned. Thank you. I'll try to make this the last question I ask about the past and about the Beatles. You must watch what your former colleagues are doing, and do you derive satisfaction from it? Are you happy for their successes?
Yeah. I'm most happy, I guess we all are in a way, for Ringo's success. Because the other three of us, you know, it always went round Ringo was dumb, but he ain't dumb. But he didn't have that much of a writing ability, and he wasn't known for writing his own material. And there was a bit of a worry that, you know, although he can make movies, and he does make movies, and he's good at it, that how was his recording career going to be? And in general, it's probably better than mine, actually, so he's doing all right.
And what's amazing is that he's done it with some songs that were popular when you and I were both teenagers in this country.
A lot of You're 16 and things like that, stuff that, you know.
Oh My My?
Well, I think he wrote that. Is that an oldie?
Only You?
Oh, Only You. I suggested that for him.
You did?
Yeah.
Now, why is it that those songs done by Ringo Starr achieved this popularity when they were popular 20 years ago?
Because a good song is a good song.
Okay.
You know, and you can jazz it up or do it with whatever rhythm you like. But if the song is there, it stands.
When musical groups become successful, or musicians, or really when anybody in the public eye becomes successful, immediately there are rumors about their personal lives, and I suppose the fact that some people are caught in the possession of certain unlawful substances like marijuana or cocaine or LSD or speed. A lot of people say that's all they do. They smoke a lot of grass, they eat a lot of LSD, they're all acid heads, and they're all all rocked out. How much of it is there going on in truth?
I wouldn't know, you know. I mean, what do I know?
Come on, John. Come on.
I know as much as you.
Come on.
In
Well,
truth,
I don't
how
know
much of it goes on where? You know, it depends.
Well, in your little coterie of friends,
my friends are as clean as a whistle.
I'm sure they are, as a hound's tooth, in the words of General Eisenhower. But
I'd say there was as much dope in the music business as there is in virtually any other business now. That dope is so out in the open that you can go anywhere and it's there. So there's no sort of underground movement of people taking dope, you know. The most extraordinary straight people are taking dope, including cocaine. It's available anywhere at any time, and it's all over the place. If you want it, you can have it, you know.
And it's no more predominant or prevalent in your industry than it is in insurance, in retailing, and in selling tires. Is that what you're saying?
I think you'll find a lot of middle-class people in their mid-30s who grew up in the 60s have marijuana and now cocaine around like you'd have a glass of wine. You know, I'm not saying it's good, you know, and cocaine's not too good for you at all, you know, but I'm saying that it's there, and a lot of perfectly, quotes, ordinary people use it.
If you were to be approached by the National Council on Drug Addiction, or whatever the name of the agency is, to make one of those little films that run on television, you'd say, "Hi, I'm John Lennon, and I like to tell all young people that dope is a bummer and cocaine is bad." Would you do that? I mean, do you believe that strongly in there?
It would depend how the advert was made, you know, because you can't bull blank the kids, because they know more about dope than I do now. There's drugs on the market that I don't even know what they are, you know. And so if it was done the way I would like to do it, I
How would you like to do it?
I'd have to think about it. I'd have to talk to whoever asked me to do it, you know. I mean, it's no good me saying, hey, dope is bad, don't do it. You know, they say, what, so what, who are you? You know.
Well, you have a certain following among young people, and they might listen to you, whereas they would not listen to Yasha Heifetz, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but people, there's an illusion that just because somebody buys your record that they're going to do what you tell them. It doesn't work that way. If I tell them, go jump in a river, just because they buy my record?
No,
you know,
not at all.
right?
But certainly, you'd be surprised how people who appear on television or people who appear before audiences are looked towards for some kind of personal insight into the world or their own lives that a lot of times those people don't even have.
Yeah, they might ask questions of famous people, but in actuality, you cannot tell people anything. They have to find out for themselves. I mean, you can leave signposts saying, you know, it's dangerous here, or you can fall over there, but in reality, you know, it's no good telling people anything. They have to find out.
What part did drugs play in leading to the present circumstance in which you find yourself? And I think we can tell that part, and then we'll bring
Leon Wiles.
Mr. Wilds out, and he will be here for the discussion of your immigration procedure.
In the late 60s, there was a headhunting cop who was not very high up in the drug department in London, which was pretty new anyway. They had 2 dogs for the whole department. And he went round and bust every pop star he could get his hands on, and he got famous. And some of the pop stars had dope in the house, and some of them didn't. It didn't matter to him. He planted it or did whatever. Later on, that's what he did to me, because at that time I didn't have any drugs. And
he planted something in your house. He planted
dope.
Marijuana in your house, didn't he? Or you say he did.
Yeah, I mean, I say he did. I know.
Well, I have to say that because I wasn't there.
Well, he's not going to get us. We're in America, all right? He's in jail now, by the way, because he later got to be top dog, and he had a big drug scandal thing going, like the one that was going over here, the big investigation in the New York police when I was first here, the one, the Serpico thing. Well, we had a little one in England, which happened after I left, and he was caught in Australia, trying to escape. You know, the English always run to Australia thinking they're going to vanish there. You know? So he was caught, and I didn't think about...
Can't vanish in Australia. Everybody knows it's down there.
Yeah, but they always have the illusion that if you go to Australia, you get away with it. You know?
Sure.
And I at the time didn't even think I was bust. And to cut a long story, that he planted me. To cut a long story short, I'd just moved into an apartment, and I'd had everything moved from my other apartment. It was all over the place. So I thought, well, maybe this is a bit of hash that was left over, and I'd forgotten all about it. Possibly that was what happened, you know. And I just copped a plea, you know. He said, I won't get you for obstruction if you cop a plea. And I thought, oh, it's $100 or whatever, you know. It's no skin off my nose, little thinking it would reverberate. And he said, oh, you know, I'll let your missus go, you know, because they never... In England at that time, the law was, if it was in this building, Mr. NBC would be caught for it. You know, he was responsible for it, even if he wasn't living there. That was the law then.
Do you mean that if an officer of the law were to come in here, and they were to find an unlawful substance upon these premises, John, that the president of this television network would be liable to arrest if that law were in effect?
That was an English law at the time that's been changed. So you better put it out.
No, this is... No. Oh, come on. Don't do that to old Tom. See that old filler there, folks? Got the writing right here on the paper. Now, come on.
We all know you're a nicotine addict. Anyway, the guy planted me, and it didn't dawn on me till later, till I called a few friends who'd also been busted and said, did you have stuff? One of them said, yeah, I did have stuff. It was on the table. They didn't even notice it. They planted a whole pile in my bedroom. You know, he had it out on the table, some marijuana. So the guy was a rip-off, and he's in jail, and half that drug department's in jail too.
But now, you thought that all you'd have to do was pay the $100 fine, but then what happened?
Well, I did just pay the fine, you know, and that was the end of it, and it went in the papers, whoopee, and another pop star bites the dust, you know. And then I came over to America, and just with no particular decision, decided that I'd like to live here, you know. I came over for a visit or something, and I was always coming and going and coming and going, and Yoko had been educated here, and she was always going on at me about New York, you know, and she finally showed it me and walked me around. And I fell in love with it, and we thought, get an apartment instead of staying in a hotel all the time.
Surely.
So the next minute we thought, hey, well, let's stay, you know, isn't it great? So we also had other complications going on. The show isn't long enough for it, about her ex-husband running away with her daughter, and there was court cases in Houston, in the US Virgin Islands, and we had to keep applying for these visas, and after you bust, it's suggested that you don't apply for 9 months, you know, and people now have problems getting in. Mick Jagger, Stones, lots of musicians, Paul, lots of people they have to sort of do a lot of ritual to get in before they can come and go. So we tried to say, look, we have this big case, we need to come in, and there was always a hassle and a hassle and a hassle, and then they started trying to throw me out.
All right, so we're at the point now where it might be helpful to have Mr. Wilds, your attorney, present, just so that nothing is said that might prejudice.
Well, it's really in case you have a question that I can't answer. You know, they ask me what's happening with you, and I say, well, there's some paper went to some senator that called, and I don't know who
All right, fine. We will have Mr. Leon Wilds, Mr. Lennon's attorney, join us after these announcements. Tomorrow we'll take away from Manhattan in 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Joining John Lennon with us now is Mr. Leon Wilds, his attorney, and if any questions come up as to where it stands or where it is in the courts or legal appeals or whatever, Mr. Wilds has the expertise to speak to those points. Plus, he looks nice on television. You were told it might be a good idea to wait for 9 months before applying for citizenship?
No, this was after the bust in England, before applying to visit the United States.
I see.
That it would be a cool idea. That's sort of, you know, it would be a cool idea.
What is your status in the country right now?
That's why Leon's here. What am I, Leon?
Well, John was charged with being deportable in the United States for being an overstay by a very interesting turn of events. The district director of the New York Immigration Service charged him with being an overstay after he gave him a 2-week extension of his time. And in the middle of that 2-week period, he
was here on visa, right? And he overstayed? Is that the position?
He had originally come in as a visitor, and he had had a number of extensions. And then finally, the Immigration Service gave him a 2-week extension. And right in the midst of that 2-week final extension, they revoked the period that they had given him, and they declared that he had been here as an overstay for the week that he had been here with their authorization. And thus the Immigration Service created the very status that they charged him with being deportable for. We fought that deportation case, and a decision was finally rendered after about a year that he was, in fact, an overstay. Now, the essential problem in a deportation case, and what lies beneath the surface, is that the only way one can get out of it is either to ask permission to leave this country voluntarily and get out, which John was not prepared to do, or to apply for permanent resident status. And the law prescribes that any person who had ever been convicted of any offense, no matter how small, relating to the possession of marijuana, at any time in his lifetime and under any circumstances, cannot obtain residence. And so that what was happening when the government did this little routine of revoking his stay and charging him with being an overstay, they were locking him actually into a position where the only application he could make was one which they were pretty sure he could never succeed in.
Which was?
Pardon?
The application that he would make would be one that he would never succeed in. Permanent residence.
Yes.
All right.
Now, we applied for permanent residence for John and for Yoko. We won Yoko's case, and she was granted residence, but John's case was denied. We went up on appeal before the Board of Immigration Appeals, and we lost there as well. And we are now before the United States Circuit Court of Appeals on the same issue. And basically, on that case, the issue resolves itself into whether or not what happened in England amounts to possession under our law, and whether what he possessed in England was actually marijuana under our law. You see, the substance which John was convicted of possessing, he pleaded guilty, was called cannabis resin. That's a generic term, and it includes a number of substances. We had one of the top experts in the United States, a psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School, testify And he gave the only expert testimony. And his testimony was that cannabis resin is not marijuana, and marijuana is not cannabis resin. Yet the Immigration Service came to the conclusion that it was marijuana. And finally, with respect to the possession aspect, our law in the United States is very clear with respect to possession. You cannot be convicted in this country for possessing an illicit substance unless it is clear that you had a knowledge as to the illicit nature of the substance that you had.
Mm-hmm.
In England, at the time of John's conviction, a law existed which had been uniformly criticized throughout the world and which was later repealed. And it provided that the government did not have to prove that you knew the nature of the substance whatsoever. So that if you possessed a bottle and you thought it had aspirin in it, and in fact if the aspirin turned out to be some serious drug, you must have pleaded guilty under those circumstances because there was no way out. And that actually was the legal situation that forced John into this, and that's where we stand with respect to the immigration.
I know that this is not a excuse me.
Yeah, I was just going to say one interesting point was that when they started the initial case, they claimed that it was a local New York problem, and they also started the proceedings against John and Yoko. Well, halfway or a third of the way through the proceedings, or whatever the number is, they discovered that actually Yoko did not have any record in England, and also she had a green card by a previous American husband. So this local case that was just another case like any other alien, which is what they kept claiming, was not one of those cases. So then they suddenly had to find something else, which was this overstay business, which they pulled a fast one. And so they had to give Yoko the green card. And now one of them, I think his name is Green, keeps writing to the papers saying they're still treating me like a normal citizen, a normal alien, right, only on overstay. They're no longer mentioning about marijuana and the original normal reason I was being thrown out. And it's just interesting that the case keeps changing to suit them, you know?
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a question about that in a second. We'll continue after these final announcements from our affiliated stations. I know that this is not a satisfactory question, but maybe you have a satisfactory answer for it. You know, when all of us were little, we were told, why try to be someplace where they tell you that you're not wanted? You know, if you go over to a friend's house and his mother says, hey, I don't want you around, you come home. You could live almost anywhere you wanted to in this world.
Yeah.
And so if you're getting hassled this way, and this does not in any way negate the incorrectness of the hassle, if it is, as your attorney states, why put up with it?
Because I'd like to live in the land of the free, Tom. And also, if it was up to Joe Doe on the street, he either doesn't care about it or would be glad to have an old beetle living here, you know? You know, if I get in a cab with a cab driver, it's nothing to do with music or anything. He'll ask me, how you doing? I hope you can stay. So your average citizen either doesn't care or wouldn't mind me staying here. I like to be here because this is where the music came from. This is what influenced my whole life and got me where I am today, as it were. And I love the place. I'd like to be here. I've got a lot of friends here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I want to be, you know. Statue of Liberty, welcome. I even brought my own cash.
Brooklyn Bridge, want to buy it?
No, you're the ones that buy our bridges.
I should say that this program is being videotaped, this is on the air the 28th of April, so it's about 20 days ahead of schedule as we sit in the studio now. And there could very well be developments, I suppose, I'm just guessing here, between now and the air date for this that will possibly make this whole conversation moot if you're that far along. I don't know. Is that true, Counselor?
It's quite possible. There is another case which we haven't discussed, and that is our case against the government.
You've got one against them.
That's true.
Yeah.
We've gone to the court on 3 separate occasions, but the action that I'm talking about is the selective prosecution action. We had some information that the deportation proceedings against John were not normally brought. Certainly the procedure followed was not normal. And we had learned that rumors got to the Senate Internal Security Committee that John had some idea, or was rumored to have some idea, of appearing at the Republican National Convention in 1972. and leading an anti-Vietnam War demonstration or the like. And that this information in the form of a memorandum was transmitted by Senator Strom Thurmond to the then Attorney General John Mitchell, who may have at the time been sitting with the other hat as well as head of CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President.
Yes, the former president.
And we understand that a series of memoranda led all the way down to the district director in New York, and that the action he took was not as a result of John's immigration status, but rather as a result or an intention to prevent John from exercising constitutionally protected rights.
What are they afraid of you doing if you have permanent residence here?
I don't know. I think when it was started, somebody didn't want me here, and now they probably don't mind, you know. It's just that it's a bureaucratic thing. It's gone on, and how do we stop it? You know, maybe whoever makes the decision doesn't know whether it'd be either politically right or what's going to happen if we suddenly stop now when we started it. I mean, it's very sort of embarrassing for everyone, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that half the people that started it are now having their own problems, right? So I don't know where I am. I know there's a different lot of people in charge of my case now, and I'm sure they're not as hot to get me out because they didn't even have the Republican convention in San Diego, and I was not committed to go there either. Mm-hmm. So
I have less than 1 minute left. You know, you've been a very low-key and very mild-mannered guest on this program, and yet I've heard you described as being an egomaniac, and I'm having a little trouble understanding that description of you vis-a-vis the way that you've really been during this hour we spent together. Why would you be called that?
Because one gets a reputation, you know, for one thing or other, whether it's true or false. If being an egomaniac means I believe in what I do and my art or my music, in that respect you can call me that, you know, and I believe in what I do, and I'll say it, you know. And otherwise this is pretty much me, you know, apart from being on TV, you know.
Well, you're one of the nicest egomaniacs I've ever met.
Well, so are you, Tom.